All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining us during the Lytham Partners Spring 2022 Investor Conference. My name is Robert Blum, Managing Partner of Lytham Partners, and our upcoming presentation, we welcome Precision Optics, ticker symbol of PEYE, on the OTCQB, and their Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Joe Forkey. Before I turn it over to Joe, I want to remind everyone that he will be available for one-on-one meetings later this week. If you have not already signed up, you can send me an email, and that's Blum, B-L-U-M, at lythampartners.com, or you can visit the website at lythampartners.com/virtual. Click on the one-on-one meeting request button. We'll get you taken care of. So with that, Joe, I'll turn the floor over to you for the presentation.
Great. Thanks, Robert. And thanks, everyone, for tuning in today. Let me pull up my slides, and we'll get right to it. Okay, so Precision Optics Corporation, as the name implies, is an optics company. Everything that we do has something to do with optics, and we do lots and lots of optical systems that are technical optics. So we make cameras and those sorts of things, and I'll talk a lot about the very specific ones that we work on as we go through this slide deck. Here's our disclaimer our lawyers require us to put in. Moving right along, we work in a number of systems that are in medical devices. And again, I'll talk more about those as we go through these slides. But just by way of summary, we make some of the smallest imaging systems in the world that can go to places in the body that we could never go before. And we make some of the most advanced 3D imaging systems so that surgeons can now see in 3 dimensions when they're doing surgeries. The company has been in business since about 1982. We have a long history. Over the last few years, we've focused on a couple of very specific technologies in order to address the needs that we see have been developing in the markets that we serve. 3 of the very specific areas that we've developed very unique proprietary technology in is in the area of micro-optics, 3D imaging, and digital imaging. Micro-optics is an area where we can make lenses and prisms as small as a couple hundred microns. So just to put that in perspective, that's about 2 times the width of a human hair. So we can make some of the smallest optics in the world. In the area of 3D endoscopes, we can make endoscopes that allow surgeons to see in 3D so that they can do more surgeries than they'd be able to do otherwise. And in particular, this helps to enable a lot of the new robotic surgical systems that have been coming online. And then finally, especially with our acquisition of Lighthouse Imaging, which you'll hear me talk about a couple times during this presentation, this is an acquisition that we did about 6 months ago. We've augmented our digital imaging capability quite substantially. And this is a capability where we can use the small digital sensors that were originally developed really for commercial use, for consumer use. We can now use those digital sensors in both medical device and in defense applications. And in order to do that, you have to have some particular expertise in handling imaging data when it's in an electronic form. And so we have a whole team of really highly capable electrical engineers who specialize in dealing with images when they're in digital and electronic format. When you roll all 3 of these together, the micro-optics, the 3D endoscopes, and the digital imaging, it means that we have a capability to build some of the most advanced imaging systems in the world, mainly for medical devices, but also now more and more for some defense applications. What this means is that we have a capability now to build the entire system from the front end of the lenses that are on the digital imaging system all the way back to the images that show up on the high definition TV screen. Our business model is one where we partner with our customers. We take the technology that's proprietary that we've developed ourselves, and we use that with our customers to make their products possible. And so we partner with them from the very early stages of development. And that benefits us in 2 ways. The first one is that we generate significant revenue from the engineering work that we do, the development work that we do in connection with our customers' programs. So we charge them for the development, even though we maintain access to and in most cases ownership of the IP. The second benefit is that we build into their products our technology. And so we partner with our customers not only on the front end when they're developing the product, but also on the back end when we go into production. And we build the products typically for many, many years for our customers. So the real key to our growth going forward is a very large and robust pipeline, and I'll talk about that in one of the slides as we move forward. We have a number of strategic initiatives that we've taken on over the last few years. I think the most significant of which is a couple of acquisitions that we made over the last 2 or 3 years. The first is Ross Optical, which is a group in El Paso, Texas. We acquired them in 2019. There's a whole slide on it. I'll talk more about it. But it's been a very successful acquisition. Ross Optical gets us a greater capability in sourcing optics from around the world and in building small subassemblies, as well as doing thin film coatings with some very sophisticated equipment that they have in El Paso. The acquisition of Lighthouse Imaging we completed just about 6 months ago, and I already mentioned this, but Lighthouse Imaging was a friendly competitor that focused on the electronic side of digital imaging. POC, prior to the acquisition, focused on the optical side, the design of the optics that form the image. And so by putting these two groups together, we're able now, as I mentioned already, to be able to take a system and design it and build it from beginning to end, from the distal end, which has the front end optics on it, all the way to the back end, where the surgeon or the user of the optical system is able to see an image on their monitor. There are a couple of other areas that we focused on over the last few years in order to drive significant growth. One is in the area of sales capacity. So we've expanded our sales team substantially over the last few years. We see the markets growing in a substantial way. And so having the sales resource available to capitalize on that has been really critical to our growth, and we believe critical to our growth going forward. Similarly, once we capture the customer's order, we have to be able to execute on that, and that requires us to have a significant technical resource. And so we've expanded our technical team quite substantially over the last few years. And then finally, once we get through the development cycle, and once we get through the design process of the product, we need to have a very robust production capability. And so we've invested in the production capability, and in particular, in a number of production technologies that allow us to piggyback on the micro-optics that we've been developing to be able to make single-use products, which is an area of the market that we see growing pretty quickly and pretty substantially. The company's been in business for about 35 years. I joined the company in 2003. I became CEO about 10 years ago. We started our latest sort of business model and strategic approach about 5 or 6 years ago. It took us a little while to augment the technologies we had and develop the proprietary technology, and then to go out and show that technology to some customers. We now have a number of products that have gone through the engineering pipeline system, an engineering pipeline process, and have turned into production orders, and we see significant growth going forward because we have a very robust pipeline. We expect a number of products are going to come out of the engineering pipeline in the near future, and we believe that that's going to drive growth in a very significant way. We've seen a pretty significant increase in our revenue. The revenue increase from 2017 to 2019 was all organic. This is really the transition of a number of those first programs from development into the production stage. The jump in 2010 was the fiscal year 2010 was the acquisition of Ross Optical. We were pleased to see organic growth from 2020 to 2021. It was a little less than we anticipated, but you all may remember that we were in the midst of a pandemic. And so we were pleased during the pandemic not only to be able to continue to operate because we were deemed essential, an essential business, but also to grow our revenue. I think that's a great demonstration of the real value of the kinds of technology we've developed and the offering that we have, that our customers continued to move forward with their programs even while we were all working through the pandemic. The 2021 pro forma shows what the fiscal 2021 would have looked like if we had owned Lighthouse Imaging in fiscal 2021. So you can see that we expect this fiscal year 2022 to have revenue as high as that 15.6 million, or hopefully even higher, because we've seen some growth both organically and with Lighthouse since the acquisition. Let me talk just a little bit about the key technologies that we have. So I already mentioned a little bit about the micro-optics. We make optics that are some of the smallest optics in the entire world. They're small enough that they can go to places in the body when we're making medical devices that surgeons just couldn't go to in the past. There are a couple of benefits to going smaller. One is that you can get to places in the body that you can't get to otherwise. You can think of things like the brain or the heart, cardiac applications, urology applications, spinal applications. These are all places where it's really beneficial to have a smaller size. The other benefit is that the smaller the incision, the more minimally invasive the application is. So even in some places where there are existing endoscopes and existing devices, making the incision smaller and getting similar kinds of image quality has the benefit of reducing the trauma to the patient, even if it's not one of those specific places where you have to have really small sizes in order to gain access to that part of the body. There are some other benefits to the micro-optics that have developed sort of in parallel with micro-optics, but are enabled by them, and that is the area of single-use endoscopic technology. And without going into too much detail, the basic idea is that as some of the digital imaging technology has reduced the size of sensors, because the image sensors are made on wafers, the smaller they get, the more you get on a wafer and the smaller per unit cost you have. We've partnered pretty closely with a company called OmniVision, which is one of the largest manufacturers of semiconductors in the world. And we partnered with them because after they are able to make their very small sensor, they need someone to make a very small lens. And so by combining the very small sensor, which has a low cost, with some of the technology we've developed, not only to make optics smaller, but also less expensive, we've been able to put together systems that have a price point that are low enough that they can be offered to hospitals and to surgeons as single-use or disposable devices. This has a number of benefits in terms of the logistics of managing product through the hospitals, but the biggest benefit, of course, is that it guarantees that there will be no cross-contamination. It gives you a perfectly sterilized and a brand new product from the standpoint of image quality every time you do a procedure. So one of the outgrowths of our work on micro-precision optics has been a development of single-use systems. 3D endoscopes are an area that we have been working on for some 20 years. We did the very first 3D endoscopes for a company called Intuitive Surgical way back in the 1990s. We've augmented that technology over the years. Lighthouse Imaging, when we joined forces about 6 months ago, has some unique electronics aspects of the 3D imaging. So combined, we have a really great capability to be able to design and build 3D endoscopes. These are endoscopes that allow surgeons to see in 3D, and it enables a lot of the robotic surgery systems where the surgeon is no longer in direct contact with the patient. There are some benefits to having 3D imaging that give them additional situational awareness inside of the body that particularly benefits robotic systems. The third technical area is the area that I mentioned already was augmented quite significantly when we acquired Lighthouse Imaging about 6 months ago. And this is the capability to manage the images when they're in electronic form. There are lots of sort of unique electrical engineering requirements and capabilities that center around having enough bandwidth to be able to transmit high definition images, building electrical systems so that they're isolated and they don't They're not susceptible to noise that's generated by other pieces of equipment in the surgical suite. Finally, being able to handle the images and to process the images in a way that you can present on the screen at the end of the data stream. You can present an image that highlights the parts of the anatomy that the surgeon wants to look at. So-called image signal processing is a whole discipline in and of itself. And all of those things are part of the electrical engineering capability that we have that's quite advanced and quite unique. Again, you put all of those things together and we can now do the systems from the front end optics that form the image all the way through to the back end where the image is displayed on the screen. We have a number of traditional applications, and one of the things that this demonstrates is the length of time that we are able to continue building product once it comes out of the engineering pipeline. We have a number of products that have been in production with the same customers. Many of these are very large customers whose names everyone would recognize. We have one product that's been in production for over 10 years, one that's been in production for over 20 years, and one that's been in production for over 30 years. Once we get these medical device products into production, they tend to have a very long life cycle. Ross Optical, I already mentioned briefly. I'll just talk for another minute about Ross Optical. So this was an acquisition that we did back in 2019. We expected that the combination of Ross Optical with the existing capabilities of POC would benefit the two groups in a couple of ways. So Ross Optical benefited by having access to the deep technical and engineering capability that POC had at the time. POC at the time benefited from Ross Optical's really robust worldwide sourcing capability. And so putting those two together, we have a much stronger combination where we can offer our customers the very deep technical capability, as well as the sourcing capability when we get products into production. And I think the best demonstration of the added benefit of having these two companies work together is the last bullet on this slide, which is a contract that was awarded to us by a defense aerospace customer that we announced just a couple of months ago. We went through a couple of years almost of working through prototypes, but we finally got to the point a couple of months ago where the customer awarded us a contract for $1.5 million over 6 months. So really a $3 million run rate. We expect that there will be follow-on orders. And this is for some products that I think neither Ross Optical nor POC on its own could have captured, but as a combined entity, we were a very strong competitor. We know that there were other companies that they looked at for this, and ultimately we were awarded this contract. We believe that this is a good model for future opportunities, particularly in the defense and aerospace area. So Ross Optical is an acquisition that we did a couple of years ago. The integration and the ability of the groups to work together has gone very well, very smoothly. And again, the proof is in the pudding. We have some orders now that we wouldn't have had otherwise. Lighthouse Imaging is an acquisition that we did just about 6 months ago. I already mentioned the technical benefits of the acquisition. Let me just comment that the integration of Lighthouse Imaging with POC, even after only 6 months, is going extremely well. The sales teams are already working together and already pitching the combined company to customers, and we already have interest and are moving down the road with proposals. And with any luck, we'll have our first joint purchase orders to the joint company in the next few weeks if things go well. The groups are already exhibiting at exhibits in a single booth in an integrated way. The technical teams are already working together. They've all been visiting the two different facilities. I should mention Lighthouse Imaging is in Maine, and POC proper POC's headquarters is in Massachusetts. So we're close enough that the technical teams can get back and forth and work in person when they need to. And of course, we all know how to work on Zoom very efficiently now. So the bottom line is that the integration with Lighthouse Imaging, even though it's only been about 6 months, is going very well, and we're quite confident that the combination here is going to lead to significant new opportunities for us with a very large customer base. Our company is vertically integrated. I think it's fair to say when people ask me who are your competitors, I can list some competitors for different parts of what we do. There are some companies who do electrical engineering for digital systems. There are some other companies who do optical design work. There are some other companies who can manufacture medical devices, et cetera, et cetera. There are very, very few companies who can design an optical system from the distal end to the proximal end to the imaging screen with an engineering and a production capability, along with the regulatory requirements to support both medical device systems as well as defense or aerospace systems. So in that case, having all of these capabilities all under one roof is really a significant benefit to our customers. This slide is a critical slide that everyone is always very interested in. Any of you who have been following us for any significant amount of time will recognize that the number of lines on this slide has increased quite substantially. There was a big jump, of course, when we merged with Lighthouse Imaging, but even separate from that, the number of opportunities we have here has continued to grow. We've grown our engineering pipeline. We continue to see very significant interest in many, many opportunities, to the point where we can be a little selective on which opportunities, which customers we engage with, even as we're expanding our technical team and have a capability of processing more engineering pipeline projects today than we could have even for 2 or 3 years ago. The other thing, for those of you who have been watching this recently, you may recognize that on lines, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, lines 5, which is otoscopy device number 2, and line 7, which is optics components. Those 2 lines now on the optics components line, which is the defense aerospace project, that one we announced just a month or so ago that we are now in production on that product, and we expect to deliver the first production units here in the next week or so. On the otoscopy device number 2, we're very, very close to having this in production. We finished our last pilot build of 6 units, I think, last week, and we expect to deliver our first production units again in just the next couple of weeks. So there are a couple of very specific programs that we have been talking about for some time that now are launching into production. The real business model here is to get to a place where we can have 3 or 4 of these products go into production every year. We have today 4 or 5 that we expect should go into production in the next 12 months. As a rule of thumb, each one of these we expect to go into production at about $1 million in revenue per year. And the more of these we have in production, the more likely it is that 1 or 2 of those may turn into much larger revenue amounts. Any of these could go to 5 million or 10 million, depending on how the market accepts the product and how the market grows with the product. The other benefit here is that in medical device, as I already mentioned, once we get a product into production, it has a lifetime typically of 10 to 20 years in many cases. So by putting out 2 or 3 programs every year, we grow our base quite substantially every year and continue to bring more products through the engineering pipeline. I've already mentioned just what I was going to say on this slide, which is that once products get into production, they continue for a very long time. And if we have good partners, they can often, every one of them can often grow as the market adopts the new technology that comes with their product. There are lots of places to go in the body with medical device systems. I've already mentioned some of the ones that we target specifically because of the very small size systems that we can make. So neurology in the brain, spinal surgery, which I think is not shown on here because that would be on the back, but cardiology, cystoscopy, hysteroscopy, otoscopy is another one. Going into the ear, you need to have very small sizes. Some of the rhinoscopy or ENT things need to have small sizes. So these are all places where the very small sizes can be beneficial. As far as the 3D endoscopes go, those can be used with specific robotic systems. And we've seen robotic systems now move from fairly general robotic systems to much more specific. And so there are more and more robotic systems out there and more opportunities for us to use our 3D endoscope imaging technology. Going forward, we have a pretty straightforward strategy, but I'll just run through this line by line. We want to drive growth and efficiencies in the currently commercialized products. This, again, is a reflection of the fact that these products typically stay in production for many, many years. So there are opportunities for us to have continuous improvement, to improve our margins by improving our efficiencies, improving yields, et cetera, et cetera. And so we have a very robust effort to continue to support the commercialized products and to continue to improve the production processes and technologies that we use. We want to continue to advance pipeline projects to commercialization. I mentioned a couple that are very close to production, one that went to production the last couple months, one that is going into production the next few weeks. We think, again, there are 4 or 5 that will go into production in the next 12 months, and a very robust and full pipeline coming behind that. We want to maintain our competitive advantage by continuing to advance our technologies. So I haven't talked very much about this, but we do maintain a very robust R&D pipeline. Some of this, because our customers pay us for the development work that we do with them, some of that development work naturally leads to advances to our existing technology. And so sometimes we'll piggyback on a program that we're already working on for a customer and pull out a critical aspect of the technological development for that specific program and broaden that out to a broader capability that can be brought to bear on other customers' programs. So we continue to innovate because we recognize at the end of the day, we're a technology company. And so we have to continue to advance the technology as well. We have had a disciplined investment strategy. I already mentioned in sales and marketing as well as engineering. That's the front end of all of our business. And so we have to make sure that that continues to grow so we can support more and more business that way. Recognizing operational benefits from Ross Optical and Lighthouse Imaging acquisitions, I've already talked about. Both have been very successful. And we expect that the integrated company will continue to operate as a combined entity in a way that has really benefited all 3 divisions. And then finally, we will continue to look for strategic acquisitions. There's no necessity that we acquire other companies. And I've said all along that if there is a good match from a financial standpoint, a cultural standpoint, and a technology standpoint, we won't hesitate to do more acquisitions. The optics space in general is fairly well fragmented, so we believe that there are other opportunities out there, but there is no specific requirement that we pursue specific acquisitions at any particular time. We will do it if and when the time is right, and if and when we find the right partner. Just running through the financials very quickly. Some of the high-level financials you can see from fiscal 21 to fiscal 22, there has been some significant revenue growth. Some of this, of course, has come from the acquisition of Lighthouse in this last quarter of fiscal 2022. But other than that, and the acquisition of Ross Optical, much of this has been organic. The gross margins have dipped a little bit from last year till this year. It's only dipped by about a percent. This reflects some of the new development programs that we've been working on, as well as some challenges associated with the pandemic, where some of our production numbers were reduced fairly substantially because some of the existing production programs had a reduction in volume because of the reduction in elective surgeries. We see all of that coming back, and we fully expect that our margins will recover not only to the 30 or 35%, but we expect up to 40% and higher as we move forward. The adjusted Ebitda, you can see on the yearly chart, took a big hit in 2020. Again, that was the year that we had the biggest impact from the pandemic, and we had some pretty quick reductions in our production volumes. We were able to replace some of that with some new development work, but it still hit the Ebitda, the adjusted Ebitda line pretty significantly. You can see that we recovered pretty nicely in 2021 as we made some adjustments to those reductions in volume because of the pandemic and because we're seeing some of the effects of the pandemic subside and some of those volumes coming back. On a quarterly basis, you can see that we're running roughly close to break even in quarters 2 fiscal 2021 and quarter 2 fiscal 2022. And I should just comment here. Our intent is to run the business close to break even. Right now, we're investing profits back into the company, as I already mentioned, to expand our sales and marketing team and to expand our engineering team. So really the goal here in the near term is to drive top line growth, and we expect that the bottom line will follow as it needs to. There are lots of numbers on the income statement. I think the last few slides have summarized the things that are most important. Again, we're looking at top line growth as the main focus these days, and running about break even on the bottom line. And then finally, on the balance sheet, as we ended our last quarter that we have reported, which was December, we had plenty of cash at $1.2 million. I'll just point out the debt line, which came on in December of 2021, is the debt that we took on when we acquired Lighthouse Imaging. And with that, I will finish the slide deck and turn it back over to you, Robert.
All right, perfect. We'll let you finish that up there, and fantastic. You know, we don't have a lot of time here, but I did want to just touch on maybe 2 topics. You know, first off, elective surgery. Obviously, it's the pace of that market has an impact on your business. Talk about what you're seeing of late in that marketplace.
Yeah, sure. So elective surgery and really elective medical procedures in general took a very big hit during the pandemic. I'm sure everyone remembers there were lots of announcements where hospitals were either required or chose to cut back on elective procedures because they were dealing with a great influx of folks with COVID. We've seen that starting to reverse in a very significant way. Without going into all the details, we had 3 major products that had just gone into production before COVID and 2 or 3 others that had been in production for many years. All of them pulled back pretty substantially. Essentially, all of them now are either back to pre-pandemic levels or are talking about giving us orders in the next couple of months to get back to pre-pandemic levels. We, in fact, announced one very specific case just a couple of weeks ago where we have been working on a spinal product for many, many years. Their order levels dropped in the midst of the pandemic by a factor of 7 or 8, almost to nothing. In this fiscal year, their orders now are at about $2.5 million, which is the largest they've ever been. So not only are they recovering from the pandemic, but they have been continuing to do the marketing work so that they've expanded their market. And so we're seeing that come back as well. So across the board, we saw a big dip in elective procedures during the pandemic, but now we're seeing that recover quite nicely.
Fantastic. And then the last topic here, you've talked about possibly uplisting to the NASDAQ. Any updates you can provide for us there?
Yeah, sure. So we decided after the acquisition of Lighthouse, given the shareholder equity and the place where the stock was trading, we decided that we felt it was the right time to uplist to NASDAQ. There were obviously some benefits in terms of being able to reach a wider investment community and presumably increase liquidity and such. And so we felt it was the right time. In order to do that, we have to have an annual meeting because we haven't had one in some time. So the schedule is to have the annual meeting on April 8th. We have announced that we may do a reverse split in order to get the stock price above the lower limit that's required by NASDAQ. I expect that may happen sometime after April 8th, after we have our annual meeting. And not too long after that, we hope to be uplisting.
Fantastic. So look, we'll leave it there given the time. Joe, thank you as always for the time. Greatly appreciated. Again, I'll remind everyone out there that if you've not already signed up for a one-on-one meeting and you'd like to do so, please send me an email. That's Blum, BLUM, @lythampartners.com, or visit the website, lythampartners.com/virtual. Click on the one-on-one meeting request button, and we'll look to get you taken care of. So Joe, thank you again very much. Greatly appreciate your time.
Okay. Thank you, Robert. Thanks, everyone.